All right, everybody. So I wanted to do a wrap up on January here. I managed to have a really insanely productive month. It's not just what you see here. I actually had a stack earlier in another video that I just released, but that was just sort of halfway through the month or a little better than. And this is how January finished up. So let's talk about it. So I've seen everybody talk about CloudCuckoo Land or CloudCuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. I actually even seen this on Barack Obama's reading list. Yes, I do follow it. And, he's got a pretty good taste in things. He's pretty broad. And I thought, well, why not? It's more daunting than it looks. It looks more daunting than it is because, the chapters are really short. And yes, notwithstanding the fact that it is over 600 pages, I would say about a third of them are blank pages or title pages and sort of ends of chapters, kind of like you see here. You got a lot of waste within this book. There goes my library slip. I actually got to return this. I think this is late. So anyway, CloudCuckoo Land. What can I say about it? So it was definitely a really good idea. I really liked the time span that this covers. I think it's you're talking about the Renaissance era until well into the future. I think it was about 100 years. I was not really impressed otherwise with the book. I think that the concept of it, and for bibliophiles who really love talking about books and appreciate, scholarship and, what it took to retain a lot of the knowledge that from antiquity, which is what most of these copyists and scholars did in the Renaissance. If you've got an appreciation for that sort of thing, this month, incidentally, we've talked a lot about that with the Bookseller of Florence by Ross King and The Library by Andrew Pettegree and even a little bit by the book At War, which was also written by Andrew Pettegree. We've talked a lot about this month in January, but you've got that sort of novelized, right? This is worked into the book. Takes place sort of around Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, and the Ottoman annexation of such, from the Byzantines, and then it touches down in a few other narratives. In the modern day, and then 100 years into the future when we become an interstellar species. And so, yeah, that was really brilliant. I thought that was just, the guy was definitely, tuned into something that most authors probably aren't. But I don't know, maybe it was his execution. Maybe it was the fact that there was just too many plot lines. It was hard to really settle into a plot line. I didn't find myself confused. I just found myself just switching over a lot, and so it was kind of clunky in that sense, but really brilliant idea. I can't remember what I rated this on Goodreads. As you know, I try to do these videos kind of extemporaneously, so I think this probably off the top of my head was around 4 stars, maybe even rounded down to 3 stars, I think. So I was kind of disappointed given, how high Barack Obama had recommended this. I think it was one of his top recommendations for 2023 or 2022. So, anyway, enough said about that. This is also the same author by All the Light We Cannot See. I think that had some, that had tremendous success. It was the winner of the Pulitzer Prize. So, Anthony Doerr, I don't know if I'm saying his name right. Keep it in mind. Maybe you'll enjoy it more than I did. But moving right along, this was a little more my speed. Founding Patriots by H.W. Brands, and it's subtitled Hamilton, Madison, Jefferson, Adams, and the Brawling Birth of American Politics. This is brand new, I think. At least it's, to Canada. I've just seen this hit the shelves in the last few months. It was published in 2023. It's good. It's the right size for what it is, about 400 pages after the endnotes, maybe a little more. Great cover photo there. I thought that was That was one of the main things that suckered me in. And I'm a big fan of early American history with the American Spring and leading up to it, and of course slavery. Given Black History Month, I try to follow that every year if I can. Whoa, wait! I'm not a fan of slavery, guys. That's not what I meant. I'm a fan of the era, like the history surrounding slavery. I do these videos extemporaneously, so sometimes I get a little clumsy. So it does touch on those things, but it is very Eurocentric. It is very, it wasn't so much about the story of African Americans necessarily, although of course that is part of the story. You got to know a lot. He stuck mainly to those four characters: Hamilton, Madison, Jefferson, and Adams. I would say I probably learned the most about Adams and Hamilton personally, because I didn't know too much about them. I've read a fair amount in other books, but those are I know a lot about Jefferson. I know a lot about Washington and Benjamin Franklin and all those characters that pop up. But yeah, it was interesting in that sense. It was kind of forgettable in the sense that there wasn't really anything new to the story that we're finding here, any new revelations. At least it was, there was nothing that I had picked out that was kind of, new history that we didn't know before. It was a little bit tabloidy about these, certainly Hamilton's personal life, which is just fine. I mean, that's got to be a part of the story that's told, right? So if you're interested in American history, I would say it'll keep your attention. There's lots of interest in it. Why I think I'm kind of losing interest in American history and European history overall is that seems to be the only history that exists, and that's unfortunate. I've really developed a taste for international politics and stories of individual places that just don't get much recognition. And yes, of course, you will always learn, because those are the big imperial powers. They've been meddling on all these tiny countries all around the world. So you do learn a little bit of world history by reading books like this, but it's always told from the same perspective. And I just find European and American history in particular kind of tone deaf, exceptionalist in its approach. And I'm not making any accusations against H.W. Brands necessarily. I'm just saying, we've heard the story before. We can branch out into other stories. One book that I thought, just recently I had read it, and I thought it was a really good job. It told it from the story of the locals, not so much from the how America and the big propaganda machine wants you to remember this story. Is Cuba by Ada Ferrer. That's probably one of the better books that I had read recently, and it told it not from the American point of view. We've heard that story many times, and it is slanted. It's not objective, and so that's the kind of history that I want to delve more into. So this is more, if you are a little bit of a history buff, this is a little more on the broad avenue sort of thing, on the boulevard. Now this book, I think this got 5 stars, or pretty damn close to it. Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell. She did just a fantastic job on this, especially considering I think she was only 27. I might be wrong about that, but I seem to recall she's pretty young and, really perceptive. She, wrote with clarity. Her language is approachable, but still, you can tell she's an authority on the subject. And what I found so balanced about her approach was the focus on the word cult in itself. Cult can be applied to the most innocuous things. You can apply it to, what we're doing right now, BookTube. Cult classics, in the film and the book categories. It can be applied to fitness, which can get more dangerous, and then it can be applied to, which she talks a lot about fitness, by the way, like CrossFit and such. It can apply to cosmetics, and that, now you're getting a little more dangerous sometimes, all the way into religious groups, which is generally what we think of, fundamental religious groups, which I certainly have a history of my own, dating from my childhood into my early adulthood, and then leading straight into like death cults, like Jim Jones and Marshall Applewhite and Dave Koresh and all those figures. So, and another thing that I really liked about her writing here was, as you can tell with the subtitle, the language of fanaticism, and she's got quite a background in her education there with language. She's speaking mainly about the kind of vernacular and jargon that sort of evolves in these groups. And that's a really unique angle to take, because generally when we think of cults, we think of personalities, right? I'm talking about the more dangerous death cult types, religious cults, gurus and new age stuff. But she's got a little bit more interest in the language, because you can have groups that don't necessarily have a charismatic leader to follow, like Jim Jones, right? You got CrossFit isn't known for its leaders per se, and but the language that emerges out of these groups, that can sometimes be an indication that you might be in a cult, and perhaps even a dangerous cult. One part of the book that I really liked, she gets those who she's interviewed to write out like a paragraph of something that they might have said when they were belonging to the cult. And yeah, they have a very, very unique way of expressing themselves, and to a point where it's like if any onlooker or outsider had been listening to this person, they'd be like, what are you getting on about? And I certainly remember from my past as a Jehovah's Witness, this is many years ago when I was a young adult, you would say things like, we were out in the field the other day, had an encouraging discussion with this one lady, and she was a spiritual person. She wasn't necessarily denominational, but we've lost track of her. I guess the seed fell in the wrong soil. Like you have this insider speech. You might have picked out, you might have been able to keep up with what we were saying there, but this sort of shorthand that develops, and that can be a pretty clear indication of, whether you're in a cult or not. It's not a perfect science. It's a moving target, right? Think about it. If you're going to become an astrophysicist, there's a very particular language that they use, and that's not culty at all. If you're going to be a mathematician, if you're going to specialize in anything, really interesting. Can't recommend it enough. I don't know if I gave it 5 stars. If I didn't, it would have been pretty damn close. Okay, I would say for the latter part of the month, this was probably the highlight for me. And I'm not a fiction guy. When I first saw this book, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, I thought, young adult, pretty bubblegum. As you know, I've been trying to branch out and read more, on the main track. But man, was I ever impressed. I think this did get 5 full stars out of me. I got the only criticism that I can think of, and this is a pretty small criticism, is she overuses the word palimpsest, which, if that's the worst you can think of, you did pretty good. Not that it was out of place, she did use it correctly. It's just that she used it a lot. And it's just a slight irritation. It wasn't a big deal, it still got the 5 stars, obviously. But what a great book, you've got this long time lapse here between, I think it was a little over 300 years that it takes place. It's a Faustian story, pretty straightforward Faustian. And I really like the archetypes in this. There's so much that she's saying. If you were to just follow her metaphors, it seems like she's commenting on so many more things than the novel is admitting. You know what I mean? It seems like she's having another discussion with you through archetypes, even though it's not really central to the plot. I tend to be a little bit Jungian in that way. I tend to read a lot into these books, especially fiction. But I mean, if it's there, that's what it's for, right? So really liked that. I would say the sort of love triangle, it almost follows the vibe to a T, I would say, as Gone with the Wind, which I thought was really neat. I don't know if she was trying to copy that love triangle, the toxicity of Scarlett with Butler, for example, but it was Butler, right? Anyway, Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. Just such a toxic relationship. But there's a romance there, and yet he's got her number on a lot of different things, and so there's sort of that same interplay going on, but more of like a pure sort of idealistic love between Scarlett or Addie with the other character. So that was really cool. I really wonder, V.E. Schwab, heaven's sakes, you're probably not watching, but if you are, please comment. Were you going for that? Because it was really well executed if you were. Let me know what you thought of that, because that was kind of the most exciting I read towards the end of January, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. Okay, the last book was The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, or Michaelides. I don't know how to say these names. But it was okay. I think this came out at 3 stars. I loved the dark academia vibes. I think that he could have probably doubled down on it. That would have been really cool. It's a whodunit novel, so that's always interesting. I think that his this is just a younger writer. I don't know how old he is. I get the sense he's fairly young. He did do the plot twist well. Like it did kind of come out of left field. The trick is to kind of how close or how far away do I make the perpetrator to the main character? You know what I mean? So that's hard to execute, and then not to sort of seem cliched or overdone the way you execute that. So it was okay. It had some things that were all right about it, but I probably could have missed it. It's gotten a lot of press. It was bestseller for a long time, I think. And of course, this is coming on the heels of The Silent Patient, which was a bestseller as well. So. I probably could have done without it. And by the way, I didn't actually read this in January. I started it, and I think I finished it on the 1st. So is that allowed? I don't know. Anyway, let me know what you guys were reading this month. I certainly had a very productive month. It's not too often that I get around to about 6,000 pages. So yeah, chat me up in the comments. I'd like to hear what you guys have been reading. Thanks for stopping by. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video. If you want more like the one you just watched, click the suggested video on this screen. Make sure you subscribe, and to connect with me on my other platforms, my handles are linked below in the description, alright? Take care, peeps. Till next time.